No trees were harmed in Madison Cawthorn's pathetic attempt to look manly by beating up a rotten tree trunk, but I'm still amazed he didn't break a wrist. It shouldn't surprise us, then, that he thought a video of his assaulting a paper target with not one, but two semi-automatic weapons makes him a tough guy. His egregious form aside, both punching and shooting, it's become a truism that politicians on the right think that pictures of their destroying inanimate objects with weapons of war are compulsory campaign material. But what is it with the goddamn Christmas cards? It's heartwarming to see members of Congress post Christmas pictures on social media of their families holding weapons. Rep. Thomas Massie, a Republican from Kentucky, kicked off the trend with a Twitter post in which he and 6 other members of his family are seen holding guns in front of a Christmas tree because those two things go so beautifully together. He did this 4 days after the mass shooting in Oxford, Michigan, in which a 15-year-old boy murdered 5 of his fellow students. Because being the worst possible person you can be is a new goal of elected Republicans, he wrote in his tweet, P.S. Santa, please bring ammo. Presumably because Ethan Crumley, the shooter, was looking for ammo on the internet, which is hysterical if you're a sociopath, I guess. After the fallout, Massie claimed that bringing together guns, family, and Christmas adds up to freedom, which suggests he doesn't know what any of those words means. But it triggers the leftists, no pun intended, I'm sure, so that's all that matters. I'm going to double down, he said. I'm never going to delete that picture, which is increasingly a tactic on the right. Never admit you're wrong and double down on your wrongness. Lauren Boebert was among the first to show support by posting a picture of herself in front of a Christmas tree with her 4 terrified-looking, heavily armed boys, 2 of whom looked to be under 10. Last night, a gunman went on a shooting spree in Denver, Colorado, killing 4 and injuring 3. Oh well. It wasn't on the front page of any online publication, outside of Colorado anyway. I'd seen the news on Twitter in the middle of the night and had to Google it this morning. It's awful, but it makes sense that these events, which are commonplace in America now, would fail to stir most of us anymore. An armed society is a polite society, we're told. Although this sounds like the motto for the NRA, it was written by Robert Heinlein, but it was not his sentiment. That belonged to a fictional character in his novel Beyond the Horizon, for whom he wrote the dialogue. It was never meant to espouse the idea that guns are the solution to making us more peaceful and loving towards each other. That's a logical absurdity. But it suits the narrative of those with the guns. And in America, that would be about 81.4 million adults who own a jaw-dropping 390 million guns. Yes, there are more guns than people in the United States, about 120 firearms per 100 residents. It's easy to get your way if people will avoid confronting you because you could blow them away. And increasingly, if you're a white guy, you can get away with it. 31 states in this country allow people to carry weapons openly without licenses or permits. That explains all of the pictures of heavily armed guys in Starbucks and grocery stores. They actually think the guns make them look strong. But who needs an AR-15 to buy Pop-Tarts? What's the corollary here? I live in New York City. I take the subway at night and walk home in the dark. Does the absence of a firearm make me a snowflake? According to Everytown Research and Policy, there have been at least 149 incidents of gunfire on school grounds in 2021. Altogether this year, there have been over 470 mass shootings. We know that most Americans support gun safety legislation like background checks and closing gun show loopholes. In Michigan, a red flag bill has been proposed which will keep guns out of the hands of those who pose a danger to themselves or others. In that state, 78% of Democrats and 64% of Republicans support these initiatives. But the will of the people goes by the wayside when Republicans time and again can gerrymander themselves into permanent minority power. According to The Trace, an organization that investigates gun violence in America, gun reform efforts in Michigan are negatively impacted by severe gerrymandering, which has increasingly become synonymous with rigging. Trace reviewed Michigan election results from 2012 onwards and found that Democrats have won the statewide popular vote in all 5 Michigan House elections. In 2014 and 2018 state Senate races, Democrats also got more votes. Despite this, The GOP has controlled each state chamber the entire time. I think about the excruciating and unceasing pain carried by the parents of children needlessly slaughtered because we as a society have failed to protect them. I wonder at the unimaginable strength of some of these parents who not only endure but go on to fight the dark forces of the gun lobby and those gun fetishists who believe it's perfectly acceptable to sacrifice our children's lives on the altar of their vaguely articulated and poorly written Second Amendment right to be an antisocial thug with a gun. They seem hell-bent on creating a society in which it's almost impossible for us to enjoy our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. When you're forced to negotiate with people who never operate in good faith, as Democrats always seem to do, you must always stake out a position on the extreme end of the spectrum that's diametrically opposite from theirs. It is the position of every elected Republican that all people should have unfettered access to every kind of gun in all places at all times. The Democrats' opening bid, therefore, should be that nobody should have access to any kind of gun anywhere at any time. That's what I believe. One of the tragedies of modern American politics, however, is that the Republican position is considered unexceptional, while mine, which is publicly embraced by no elected Democrats that I'm aware of, would be considered insane. And I am so tired of it. It could take me hours, literally, I'm not exaggerating, to introduce my next guest. So instead of taking the time to introduce her properly, I'd really rather just get straight to the conversation. But first, I just want to say it is Martina Navratilova, in my view, the greatest tennis player ever. And maybe we'll talk about the whole GOAT thing. Maybe we won't. But based on my criteria, anyway, she is indeed. Not simply because of her brilliance as a singles, doubles, and mixed doubles player, but because of the impact she had on the sport, both in terms of athleticism, but also politically, and we'll definitely talk about that, but also because of the rivalry she had with Chris Evert, which is not the greatest rivalry in women's tennis. It's not the greatest rivalry in tennis. It is the greatest rivalry in all of sport. So without further ado, hi, Martina.
Hi, Mary. Thank you. You are very, very kind and slightly biased, I think, because we're like close to the same age. I know I'm older, but close enough. And anyway, thank you. Appreciate it.
I don't think I'm biased at all, but I'm incredibly happy to have you here for a whole bunch of reasons. But I did want to start a little bit talking about tennis because it is the best sport in the history of sports in the entire universe. And I think there have been some things happening in the world of tennis that sort of transcend sport that I think we kind of need to grapple with too. And as somebody who is kind of in the pantheon of people who really did push the sport in a direction it needed to go in terms of its being accepting, in terms of its embracing politics when necessary. I'm just wondering how you see the world of tennis right now.
Well, first of all, I want to say if you hear some weird sounds, it's not anybody getting hurt. I have 5 parrots in the near vicinity in this room, and I also have dogs. So if there's barking, you know what that is. And if there's some really weird noises, it would be the parrots. Anyhow,
I have an African gray, so I completely understand.
One of them's name is Pushkin, and he has an uncanny ability to start screaming when I'm on a Zoom call. So chances are he'll make himself
Gets jealous.
Anyway. Tennis, it's amazing these days because of the situation with Peng Shuai, right? The Chinese tennis player who's a 3-time Olympian, was #1 in the world in doubles. I've met her many times and watched her many times, and we know the situation, with her accusing a former high-ranking Communist Party official of sexual assault. And essentially, she was in a relationship with him years ago, and then again, it kind of restarted. Now she's denying all of it. Tennis world has been very concerned about her because, for obvious reasons, when she tweeted that or put that story on Facebook, it was scrubbed. No, not Facebook, a Chinese version of Facebook. It was scrubbed within 30 minutes and then pretended it never happened. Now she's saying it never happened. And of course, it's all coerced, right? Because there's no freedom there. And we're still all very uneasy. But the WTA took a very strong stance on her behalf. And tennis has always been on the forefront of social change and doing the right thing when it came to social issues. And this is perhaps the biggest one. We were behind Arthur Ashe when he contracted AIDS through no fault of his own, but nobody contracted AIDS really through fault of their own, right?
Exactly.
And tennis was very supportive of the gay and lesbian community, always. Tennis is a very democratic sport. It doesn't matter where you're from, what religious affiliation, gay, straight, none of that matters. It's how well you hit the ball. So I think maybe that's why, you don't get ahead by knowing somebody or being friends with somebody or being rich. You get ahead because you're better than the other guy. So maybe because of that, we've always been kind of on the forefront of social change. A little bit slower on the racial issue, but still ahead of most sports, right?
Right.
And this thing, as I think, has overshadowed everything else because about 1/3 of WTA's revenue comes from China. We maybe overinvested there, overcommitted. But whatever, that happens. Sometimes you buy a lot of waterfront properties and then the market bumps and you lose money even on a waterfront property.
Right.
It was just the wrong kind of investment. But the WTA took a really strong stance and it really is trying to pull the other world tennis organizations along, and they have not backed us up. The ATP did not back us up. The men's association. The IOC, forget about it. NCAA, the major league sports, they kowtow to the Chinese, right? When I think it was the general manager of the Houston Rockets that tweeted something about Hong Kong, and they had to make excuses and ask for forgiveness of the Chinese ruling party, etc. It's all about business, and you don't hear, the top athletes that have big endorsements really talking about China. That's one subject they stay away from. They're great on so many issues, but that one nobody touches because it kind of hits them in the pocketbook. So the fact that WTA took this strong stance, my hat is off to particularly Steve Simon, the CEO, and everybody else there that took a hit and takes potential hit. The players as well have been so behind Peng Shuai. It's been really heartwarming to see that.
Yeah, and thank you for laying that out so well, because I'm sure a lot of people maybe aren't aware of what's going on with China in general and Peng Shuai in particular. And I was also very heartened by what the WTA and Steve Simon's position is, because not that it would be acceptable, but it would have been understandable for them not to, given, as you said, nobody else has taken such a strong position. And it seems to be, it seems to me to reflect two things that go on in the larger world. One is that women in general just aren't as important, Yeah. And she's also, in America, would be considered a woman of color because we're America. And also just the sway money has, not that that's new, but it does seem, with increasing wealth inequality and the fact that we're letting the rich get so much richer, it seems to be reaching a point of no return. And I just think that if we could put things in perspective and get more organizations, because seriously, what is it really just money? Is that all that people are worried about? And the fact that I get why tennis wanted to go into the Chinese market. Lena, the brilliant Grand Slam champion from China, definitely helped that. And, you know, maybe part of the calculation was that the political situation was fluid and there might be an opportunity to open things up. But clearly there was also an economic incentive because it is such a huge market, which makes what the WTA did all the more impressive. But then we get to the IOC, and they know what they were getting into. So the fact that they aren't willing to defend a three-time Olympian who is completely, I'm guessing, I mean, I think we have a pretty good idea of what's going on, completely isolated and probably not going to be leaving China anytime soon. You know, the IOC is actively complicit in that horrific situation. And I have to be honest, this to me kind of reinforces a belief I've had for a while that women's tennis is better off without men's tennis.
Without China.
Men's tennis. Without men's tennis.
You know, we've been trying to get together with the men for decades now to form one association, one union, whatever you want to call it, so that we have more bargaining power when it comes to the majors. Because when you put the money together and what normal tournaments have to put up, prize money wise, and the risk they take, and how much percentage of that goes to the players, which is about 25% compared to the majors, which is 5 to 10%. The players should be getting a lot more money for winning these majors. You know, I mean, the money has gone through the roof compared to what it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but it still is lacking. And so the women have been trying to get together with the men, and we're like, no, and the men like, no, we're good. And the fact how wimpy that response was on this front was really disappointing to me, but not surprising. But anyhow, maybe we are better off not with men, and maybe I like those combined events. I wasn't sure it was such a good idea because women always get pushed aside. But we made sure that we get treated equally, equal prize money, equal representation, equal time on the major courts, etc. So everything's equal there. And overall, the crowd seem to really enjoy it. They've become the biggest events on the calendar.
Well, that's the thing. It demonstrated the fact that women's tennis is the draw. Right. Generally speaking, I mean, obviously, if you have Federer playing Nadal, okay, but overall, women's tennis is the draw. And that's the part that I find, well, I was going to say mystifying. What am I, an idiot? Of course it's not mystifying, but it is, after all of the decades of activism, it is quite something. And that I just want to go back to this briefly because I think it was, you know, obviously the Gang of Nine was a huge turning point. And the whole Virginia Slims movement. Sorry about the smoking, but other than that, I really do think that the way you transformed yourself as a player and the seriousness with which the sport, especially on the women's side, took pushing the envelope in terms of athleticism and fitness and stuff. And then like you're not much older than I am, but when you're 8, 9 or 10 years is like a huge difference, right? So you and Chris Everett seemed like you were a totally different generation. And of course you weren't, but I was a kid and you were professional athletes. So to me, it was watching how you pushed each other and transformed each other's games in a way that I don't think would have happened. And that is, as far as I'm concerned, like one of probably the primary reason why women's sport evolved the way it has. And I'm just wondering if you over the course of that incredible rivalry, if you experienced it that way and saw how, the two of you kind of helped push each other, shape each other's games, et cetera.
I think we didn't realize how special the rivalry was until well into it. I remember at the very beginning, my very first match I played against Chris, I just wanted her to remember my name because I was a nobody from Czechoslovakia and she was a superstar already. And then I remember several years later, I had beaten her a couple times. I started out the rivalry about 18-2 holes. I beat her twice and she beat me like 18 times before I started winning more. But still, she was always talking about her rivalry with Ivan Kulagong. I'm like, what about us? What about me? I think, we got a pretty good rivalry going, but I hadn't beaten her enough, I think, at that point for her to pay that much attention. But in any case, neither one of us knew how special it was until maybe we played each other like 30 or 40 times. It ended up we played each other 80 times.
Right.
But we definitely pushed each other to be better tennis players. I knew I had to get better if I wanted to beat her because she was better. Yep. More consistent, and I just needed to get better somehow. And then when I started beating her, at one point I beat Chris 13 times in a row. She knew she had to do something different because she was never going to beat me again. And she did. She got in the gym and she got stronger. She got fitter. Not that she wasn't fit, but just quicker and stronger more than anything. And was experimenting, did some different things on the court as well. And then she did beat me a few times after she started training differently. And so we made each other into better tennis players. So we might have one more without the other. For sure she would have, and I probably would have too. But overall we made each other better tennis players. And that's what I was always striving for, to be as good a tennis player as I can be rather than going for titles. The titles were great. But I really enjoyed the process, and I enjoyed trying to find ways to get better as an athlete, as a thinker on the court, technically, tactically. I think you hear the whistling. It's one of the small birds.
I do.
And so it was kind of a blessing and a curse. The blessing was we made each other better, but the curse was that we would have won more without the other. But that's how it goes. But it's special. In fact, I just texted with her today, so we're still close. She lives in Boca. I'm in Miami now. But we see each other frequently and, have a great time. And there's a trust that we have that I will never have with anybody else. Maybe Pam Shriver, a really close friend on the tour as well. Played doubles with Pam for 10 years. There's a trust that is just different, when it's your competitor as well as a friend and peer. So it's pretty special.
Well, that was one of the transformations in the relationship that, obviously from a distance. And back then, I saw 4 tennis matches a year because only the Grand Slams were televised. But I went to school in Forest Hills, and that's, the US Open was still there on grass. And then I grew up in Queens, so it was still in Queens when it moved to Flushing. But it was this, you went from being rivals purely to being rivals and friends. And that added this incredible element to it as well, because I think you guys modeled the idea that you don't, even though tennis is a lonely sport, in a lot of ways, it's just you. There's nobody else to count on the other side of that. It doesn't have to extend after the match is over. Like you can be fighting somebody to death on the court, but then after you shake hands at the net, you can actually be friends. And you guys developed, because who else was at that elite level? Who else could understand inhabiting that, right?
Yeah. And also, again, I don't want to, say fuck the patriarchy, but as Mona Eltahawy says so eloquently, when it comes to being competitive, if they talk about Rafa Nadal, oh, he's so competitive, it's a plus. And when they talk about me, oh, Martina, she's so competitive, like it's a bad thing. And the same thing with rivals. The press was so trying to get us to go like this at each other. They were trying to create something out of nothing. Or if there was a little something, then they blew it out. And we ended up making a pact with each other when some of those things just blew up. And we had some difficulties, but overall, we always got along and always had respect for each other, etc., and empathy for each other. But when things finally, I don't even know what it was, but things got out of hand, and we made a pact with each other that we would never make a comment on what the press said the other one said. Only we would speak to each other first, and then we would comment, so that it came straight out of horse's mouth, so to speak, and not he said, she said bullshit. And so we did that, and we knew better. And they try to do that with the women. They don't try to do it with the guys. And
Never.
it was, the old women are catty and they can't be friends. Yes, we take things more emotionally. Yes, it's more difficult for us to forget about the match and go have a beer afterwards. But we proved that it can be done. And I kind of come from old school, so I was always that way. Chris had a harder time with it, but at the end, she was able to do that too. And we were better for it, So yeah, there's a net between us. But what I did not appreciate when I was still playing, until after I retired and I started doing TV, and I'm waiting there for the players to come out of, it's just the old Court 1 at Wimbledon. They come out of the tunnel and they come on the court. Well, now there's a tunnel as well. And it was this gladiatorial feeling that you had, one-on-one, this mano-a-mano, except nobody hits each other. But it was very much like a boxing match, because you only can hit great shots if the opponent makes you hit great shots and you react to what they do. It's definitely a one-on-one situation without it being physically, one-on-one like boxing. So I didn't recognize that until I was doing TV. What a one-on-one it really is. And that's why people are so attracted to it. But when you're in it, I didn't think about it that much.
Well, that's interesting, because it is quite. It's got to be lonely sometimes, though. Because there's literally nobody else to problem solve for you, and I think when you guys were operating at the level you were operating, that adds a kind of pressure, which you would know better than I. I imagine that's quite exaggerated now, like with social media and the money and all of that other stuff. So that's why your unique relationship must have helped tremendously. And that's why I think, obviously it's probably not the only reason, but you see that now in women's tennis. You see friendships, you see a kind of respect. And, you hear about the way people know each other in the locker room and go to each other's weddings and stuff like that. And I don't think that would have happened without you guys. I could be wrong, but I think it's a huge plus. I do think, though, it's an unanswerable question: who's the GOAT? But we do pay now. I think the using Grand Slams as a criterion is absurd, especially since they mean something different from what they meant when you were playing. Australia wasn't really a thing. But also, again, as you said, how many Grand Slams would you or Chris Evert have won if you had played at different times? I don't think you guys really had any other competition for quite some time. And then you have other periods in tennis where it's like Serena Williams for a while. It was all her. Steffi Graf, same thing. So I think we need to factor in rivalries. We need to factor in impact, the kinds of impact. But that's just my opinion.
Well, you know a lot about tennis. That's clear from just what you said now. But yeah, for us, the biggest tournaments were Wimbledon, the US Open, and then the season-ending championships, the WTA finals, which Chris won, I don't know how many, like six times maybe. I'm not sure. I won it 8 times. And so if you just take Wimbledon, the US Open, and compare to Serena Williams or whoever else, I think our numbers would be pretty good on that front. So again, it was a different metric system. It was a different computer system, actually, and they tinkered with it while I was still playing. At one point, I was winning by so much that they had to change it so that it would be closer.
It's like the mercy rule. They did
that because I was so far ahead that they did this thing what they called the 50% diminishing return, which meant that after 6 months, your whatever points you won were only 50%. So that the more recent results would be more relevant. But it still went through the year. So at the end of the year, I may have had much better results than Chris, But mine came the first 6 months, the better results. Her better results came the second part of the year, and she would be close to number one. Or at one point, she took away my number one ranking in like July after winning the French, because of that 50% diminishing return thing. If it had not been in play, I would have been number one longer, more weeks. So
That's incredible.
again, I don't talk about that, but it's like you comparing apples and oranges. So
Yeah.
you need to really compare the same to same, and then we can have that conversation. And if you want to talk again of Wimbledon, French Open, Wimbledon, U.S. Open, and the season-ending championships, and we're pretty much close with Chris and I and Steffi and Serena Williams.
Right.
Now what? Then what happens?
Exactly. And also, team tennis was a much bigger deal.
Well, we played World
when
Team
you
Tennis.
guys were
Chris didn't go to
playing.
the French Open because she played World Team Tennis in Phoenix, and I played for Cleveland 1 year, and then Boston Lobsters. In fact, Robert Kraft was the owner of
really?
the Boston Lobsters team. That was his first foray into professional sports.
Oh, wow.
And I knew him and his wife and his kids way back. So we played 3 months of tennis with just 3 weeks off for Wimbledon, and the week before we did not go to Paris at all. Jimmy Connors didn't play the French Open a bunch of years as well when he would have won it, and that's the only major he never won. So again, people say, well, go this, go that. It's you cannot compare generations. It was completely different upbringing, different training, different everything. Yep. So you can only compare those players of the same era, and know that you are one of the greatest, as Chris and I both are, and of course so is Steffi, so is Monica, and of course Serena Williams, and I'm good with that. We don't need to put them in order because and also I think people really always think the current ones are better. Yeah, they're better, but would they have been better 50 years ago?
Imagine if
that game, right?
Imagine if an 18-year-old Martina Navratilova started playing tennis, or 14-year whatever, started playing tennis now with the way training is, the way we understand nutrition, the way we understand, a holistic approach and massage and acupuncture and all that other stuff. I mean, it's a ridiculous premise that they keep. Every time I see a list, I just roll my eyes.
I didn't make top 3 the other day. I saw somewhere on Twitter. They were ranking. I think it was Serena, Steffi, and Monica. Yeah, I didn't make that list. I'm like, okay. That's why I don't talk tennis on Twitter. I mean, I really limit it to politics for the most part. But the other day, there was some a football player got hit, and it was a cheap hit. And I commented on it. It shouldn't have been. He should have been a penalty. Blah blah blah. And the guy says, "What do you know about football? You only talk about politics." Okay.
Oh, that's great. And, because usually it's, why are you talking about politics? Stick to tennis.
Well, I've been told that too. I've even been told that by some progressives. I forget this guy's name, but he's like, you way over your skis. I'm like, really? By the way, I'm a pretty good skier, so no.
I know you are. I know.
Far over my skis, but whatever.
Kind of a weird thing to say. So it sort of like begs the question, who's allowed to talk about politics on Twitter then? I guess nobody.
And the thing is, they don't tell normal people stay out of politics, but they should as hell tell athletes, the old shut up and dribble famous quote by Janine Pirro. I think she said that. Yep. It's just ludicrous. What?
Shut up and sing, the Dixie Chicks were told.
About what I know. Let's talk about the issues, not about who is saying it. So anyhow.
But that's what's so ridiculous. I mean, there are issues. I don't need to be an expert in journalism to know that Chuck Todd shouldn't have that job.
What's up with that? What is with MSNBC? It's like, really? Of all the people, him, I can't watch it anymore. I just don't watch. And by the way, I'm missing Nicole Wallace doing this, so that's. I love Nicole.
Wow. All right, that's a huge.
And because we're in a new house, I don't know how to record yet.
But yes, Nicole Wallace has evolved in a really gratifying way. I mean, not that it's any of my business, but somebody who consumes news, I'm always skeptical of people who are Republicans.
Well, Nicole is an open-minded Republican, which is an oxymoron these days.
But it's totally an oxymoron. And in fact, I think it's impossible. Like, I don't think you can be a Republican if you're an open-minded person. And it also kind of makes me wonder why were they ever Republicans? Because I get it. Like, it's so uncivil now and anti-democratic. And that's actually something else I wanted to talk to you about, this new embrace on the right in America of Russia and, that insanity. But a lot of it's not new, like being anti-choice, being anti-marriage equality. So I do wonder. I guess not everybody has to agree with everything, and there are people who are one-issue voters, and there are people who, foreign policy is the most important thing, and they're willing to let the other stuff slide. I don't know. But it has been really great to see Nicole Wallace become, I think, a really important voice. And I mean, not that it should be surprising. I just honestly, I didn't know of her other than that she worked for the Bush administration, which could potentially be a red flag. But there was no way to know coming in, right? I mean, it's sort of like when a tennis player becomes a commentator. How's that going to go? And sometimes it takes a while.
Yeah, it took me a while, and some never get there. Some do. I did get there, thankfully, but I had a lot of good help from people that have been in the business, like Bill McAtee, who I work with, and Brett Haber, and particularly Mary Carrillo gave me some great pointers. So I was in good hands. But you never know how it's going to turn out. But Nicole, wouldn't you vote for her if she ran for office? In a heartbeat. She would be brilliant.
If she ran as a Democrat, yes. And she would. Like, how, seriously.
You can.
Because this is the thing. I don't know. I'm very eager to know what your experience has been, especially since you live in Florida, which, is, COVID cases increased by over 1,000% in Florida yesterday.
Over what period? In 1 week?
It's over the 14-day average.
14-day. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. New York City increased 640% yesterday. I thought that was bad. But then the entire state of Florida, 1,000%. He wants to put together his own militia, apparently.
Yep.
And he thinks he's going to run for president. And you know what? In this party, he probably could.
Yep.
Successfully. So as somebody who's always been politically active, an activist, do you experience this shift as one that makes it almost impossible, if not entirely possible, to make common cause with these people in the Republican Party?
I think, they keep saying, we're so far left, going socialist and communist. I'm like, shut the fuck up about communism already. No, for me, the Democratic Party has not moved further left. I feel like we're the same place we were 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Yeah, it's evolved on same-sex marriage and gay rights and all that. But overall, we've stayed the same. Look at the Voting Rights Act. Look at what they're doing with voting now. It's completely, they're the ones that move so far right that anybody left of them is a socialist. But they're to the right of Genghis Khan, and that's not easy.
Yep. No, it takes a lot of effort, and they've put it in for 4 decades, and pointing out voting rights. In 2014, I think voting rights passed 98-0 in the Senate, and now 0 Republicans voted for it. That's where we are. They know that their only hope here is to keep people from voting, which is why they're so actively engaged in gerrymandering. And I'm quite worried. And it must, as somebody who came from a communist country, not just came from, escaped from, it must make you crazy on the level of, well, maybe not quite to the same extreme degree, but I hear similar things from people who survived Nazi Germany, that these echoes of what's going on and the way terms are being misused and lied about. So, as somebody who's experienced it, how do you make sense of what's going on vis-a-vis the left's being accused of being communists and the right suddenly embracing people like Putin?
It's difficult. It's really hard for me to wrap my head around. And living here with the Cuban community, most of South America, it's not a block, right? The Hispanic or the Spanish speaking, it's not a one block, obviously. But it is true that the South Americans are more likely to vote Democratic, but the Cubans are more likely to vote Republican. And I don't get that. But I know that people like Iman Lendl, they were on the right side of politics. And some other tennis people, they would vote for Trump, and I'm like, how can you? Because this is a totalitarian regime, and it's not communist, but it's the same thing. They're telling you what to do, what you cannot do, and you have to agree. And if we vote, and then they change the tally and scream bloody murder about voter fraud and try to change the vote of the people. The communists did that. And of course, back then you only had one party to vote for. So whoever won with 99% of the vote, because there was nobody else to vote for.
Because that happens.
But that's kind of the direction we're heading into a dictatorial regime. And the Cuban people are, it's like, don't you realize you're just changing Castro for Trump, but the end result will be the same. The end result is exactly the same, except you can still make money, but you have to kiss ass to make money. Otherwise, you're going to be on the wrong side. And, it's like no different from paying money under the table and keeping your mouth shut, not speaking against the Communist Party, etc., growing up and making political jokes because you would get in trouble. It's no different where we're heading now with the burning of the books and critical race theory. I tweeted today, I said, would Roots be considered critical race theory if kids had to watch it in schools now? And I think the answer is yes. They would not want kids to watch that. Rewriting history. I mean, the Russians, the propaganda machine that the Russians said, and by extension the Czechs, they would make a 5-year plan, right? This is the quota, and they would make it low on purpose. So then when they exceeded, it was like, oh my God, our workers, this and that, and they just lied about everything. And we just laughed about it because we knew it was propaganda. 90% of Czech people did not believe it. But the problem is now so many Americans do believe this bullshit propaganda, and they fall for it, and they go down the rabbit hole, and it drives me crazy. I'm like, how can you not see it? How can you not see where we're heading? And it's very frustrating coming here to this country, the land of the free and the opportunity, and everybody has a chance, and it ain't so. Even my kids, they go into private school, and it's, you try to help them up into an internship, this and that. I'm like, it's all rigged. It's a big system, and it's frustrating to me that it's becoming more rigged. As you said, the rich have gotten so much richer, and we may have reached the tipping point where the only way out will be just, blowing it up, a revolution or something. I don't know. It's been very frustrating. So that's why I tweeted. I think I tweeted every single day of Trump presidency. Once he started running, it was like, you must be kidding. And then every time he spit something out, I'm like, okay, he's done now. No, the base grew. The John McCain and the Mexican rapists and all this stuff. I'm like, this cannot be. And yet here we are. And now, as you said, Ron DeSantis, he's a mini Trump, except he's got better hair and better brain. He's dangerous, very dangerous.
Yes, he's incredibly dangerous. But that's the model, though. Yep. You have to be all the worst things about Donald. And I mean, I think it's, unless you're his children, it's difficult to be less intelligent than he is. So whoever it is will be more dangerous and more, I don't know, acceptable to a larger number of people. I mean, the fact that Donald was acceptable is still mind-blowing. I'm with you entirely. It was like watching a slow motion train wreck from a distance, which is how I always felt when COVID hit Italy. It's like, it can't be coming, it can't be coming, it can't be coming. Next thing you know, it's like right in front of your face. So it has been quite something. In addition to being called an idiot almost, on a daily basis on Twitter, I'm also criticized for not having come forward in 2015, 2016.
I saw that, yeah.
But listen, fair question. Why didn't I? Well, what it would have been like screaming into the void. He got away with so much worse than what I was
gonna say.
Would have been able to say about him at the time, right? Which literally would have been my opinion. It never occurred to me that anything I said would matter, and I wouldn't have. It would not have. If 23 women, right? It would have been a waste. It would have been.
I completely agree.
Yep, it would have been impossible.
You didn't have a platform then. You weren't going to get anywhere with that.
I didn't have proof,
right?
Which was the biggest thing, and that's thankfully the New York Times kind of reminded me that I did, but it was that sense that a lot of us shared, that it didn't matter what we did or thought or said. It was just going to keep going, and then it got worse. But then Biden gets elected. Did you anticipate? Well, first of all, let me ask you: what's your assessment of how things are now compared to how you thought they would be immediately after Biden got elected?
I think we're certainly better off than we would have been under Trump. That's a given. But I think he's done a great job on the vaccination front and trying to get people to get vaccinated and encourage mandates. I am all for it. No, it's not communism. No, you still are free. You're just not free to infect me. Overall, I would give him A minus. I think he just didn't get the ducks lined up correctly vis-a-vis the Build Back Better. It should not have been so difficult to get it pushed through. I think they went too big. 10 years? No, just go 5 years, half it, but still do all the programs and see how well they work. And then you actually can tweak it, because you don't know how it's going to work out. Maybe even 3 years, but throw everything at it for the 3 years, prorate that. And then you have proof in the pudding, this is working, and you can keep extending it. And people would have seen the difference right away. Now we've lost so much time in getting that passed, and it's still not passed. That even though people are getting those unemployment checks and child tax credit and all this stuff, it hasn't been enough of that where they can see, what, Biden's really made my life better. Because people were saying Trump made my life better, but when you ask them how, they don't have an answer. It's all in their head.
Well, the answer is he gave them permission to be their worst selves, and they like that.
And also, I think they felt that, we're on the same side, so I'm like part of it. I can like touch that greatness, and I'm part of that. I belong. Anyhow, but I think Biden could have gone less and done more earlier. That's my biggest beef.
I think maybe he didn't anticipate Manchin, and certainly not Sinema. I didn't see Sinema coming either.
What the hell is she to be doing this crap? And by the way, two of the worst states for immigration, Arizona, of course, and West Virginia, they're like bottom on everything.
Everything, education, poverty.
One in the worst way, in everything. They're at the bottom of the barrel, right up there with Tennessee and Kentucky. And they're the ones that scream the most about government handouts, but they're the ones that take the most money from the government.
That's right. They get more than they give. Yeah, it drives me completely crazy. But I think you hit on something that I think explains part of why we're here. They can't point to anything. They just like sort of the proximity to the power.
Yep.
They like being part of the us.
Yep.
And not the them. Again, I think one of the most diabolical things Donald did was instead of, when COVID came around, instead of making it us Americans against COVID, he made it us red versus blue. And, only people in blue states are dying, so who cares? Diabolical. But the people who follow him, that's what they want. And also the rights, understanding a long time ago that their only hope to cling to power is to make social issues political.
Right.
And I think that's one of the reasons why they still, one, have a hold, and two, it's also a reason why when anybody says to me, how do you talk to these people? I'm like, you don't.
Yeah, you can't. I tried to watch Fox News, so different people, different times, and I literally, I think my record is 2 minutes. I just
Wow.
can't. I can't because it's pointless. And again, I grew up with propaganda, so I see bullshit from a mile away. But I think it's always been the social issues. They've always made it political. Who could forget Welfare Queen by Ronald Reagan? And then George H.W. Bush with what was it, that criminal guy that got out?
Willie Horton.
Willie Horton. Hello. I mean, the dog whistle. At least they said the quiet parts. They didn't say the quiet parts out loud, but now they do. But it's always been that. They just use that as a cudgel for people, and it's like us against them. And the worst part that I saw with Trump, with COVID, it was, well, let's the states figure it out. What the fuck? This is a new disease. We have no idea about what to do. And you're supposed to, every state should be in it for themselves, figure out the vaccine, figure out the blood, the tests, and make masks and all this stuff. Are you kidding me?
Outbidding each other for ventilators?
For the same equipment.
Yep. So the prices go up.
So the prices went up. 25,000 becomes 75,000 per ventilator. Are you kidding? That to me, and that didn't make any sense, because if people can go to work and it doesn't affect the economy, would have been okay, and he might have been reelected actually, but he torpedoed himself. Thank God.
Isn't that a great irony though? Because I wish COVID had never happened. The loss is unspeakable. Not just in life, but obviously that's the worst thing. Children losing their parents, parents losing their children, but the loss of just a year and a half, the unspeakable fear. And, if I go to the grocery store, am I going to get my daughter sick? All of that we've lived with, that it makes it even harder to understand why they are continuing to fall for this stuff, hook, line, and sinker.
I don't. Yeah, it's not. You can't explain it. You can't understand it because it's not logical. And I'm an extremely logical person, and when emotions get in the way, you can't think straight. And they literally are in that space emotionally, and they don't want to leave. They don't want to be changing their minds. They don't want to be, bothered by facts. And here they are. I mean, they're killing their own base. I mean, the numbers are astonishing on that front, but they still don't want to wear that mask, guys. I don't know.
So coming from Czechoslovakia and now living in Florida, were you at all taken aback by the turn things took after the 2020 election and Donald started lying about having won, and then January 6th happened? Did you think that that especially January 6th would be a turning point where people would say, enough is enough, we cannot survive this anymore, and now things are, I don't know, things are worse than I imagined?
I did think that. I thought January 6th, that point, I was convinced he was done. He was at his weakest point that week after. But then everybody, first they denounced him, Lindsey Graham and Kevin McCarthy, and then they switched. And then Kevin goes to Mar-a-Lago, kisses the ring, and everything switches. And he becomes stronger. And I did not see that coming. I just didn't see the complicity and just pure lies from so many people. Literally, when Liz Cheney is the only one and Adam Kinzinger are the only ones that are standing up to this lunacy, it's beyond belief and just disappointing. I always thought Donald is not the problem. It's the people that were the sycophants that covered for him for so many years, and they're still covering for him. I thought January 6th would be the turning point, but what needed to happen for that to have been a turning point, Mary? I would like to ask you, did they need to hang Mike Pence for them to actually go after Donald? Did somebody need to die from the politicians for them to say, you know what, this was bad, we need to not ever do this again? What do you think?
I have to be honest, I don't think anything. They have shown time, just as Donald has shown time and time again, there's no bottom. They have shown time and time again that they will do the worst possible thing, because it was terrible. They were in fear of their lives for 3 hours.
You could see it.
It's not like they didn't know that they were just going about their business and things were crazy outside. They knew they were under attack. They knew that people were roaming the halls of the Capitol looking for them and hunting them down. And Republicans knew it didn't matter that they were Republicans because, like, how are they they're going to identify themselves? Seriously?
Right.
And I think, honestly, that it's the same horror that they keep getting away with it. So why not? They made a calculation, and I don't think the calculation at all was about Donald. It was about if we follow his lead in this particular instance, can we change the narrative so that we can illegitimately retain power? And now we find ourselves, I think, and I'd be interested to hear what you think of this, that Trumpism, so-called, has outlived Donald. Like, I don't think they need him anymore.
No, I agree. They don't. In fact, they have a better chance of winning without him than with him, because I think his mental capacity is getting lower and lower. I mean, his vocabulary is getting certainly narrower and narrower. And I think they'd be better off with Ron DeSantis than a Trump running as a Republican, because they got the playbook now. They know what works. They know how to rile up the base and how to keep him and how to keep stoking it. And they know they can get away with everything. And they also know they're cheating the system. They're putting it in. The gerrymandering. I saw that coming in the 90s with Newt Gingrich. I'm like, they're getting organized. We're going to bite the bullet one of these days. And now the chickens have kind of come home to roost. And I think we're in trouble because they're gerrymandering the hell out of it. What is not gerrymandered, they're putting in their own people into the local elections, etc. And I think even if somehow Biden would win again, the numbers, they're going to flip it. Somehow, I think they're going to find a way of legally flipping it. Or, well, not really legally, but legally enough where they get away with it. And even the generals are worried about the army. I mean, I'm listening to Half of the Yellow Sun by Ngozi Adichie. I'm reading that book. And, the military, I mean, the coup, the Biafra, Nigeria split. I mean, these are banana republics, right? Or they were. They didn't know any better. They were still kind of being born. And the army rules what's happening in Myanmar right now.
Right.
And we're heading that direction because and if the generals are getting worried, the shit is going to hit the fan. So I'm really worried about the election. I think they're going to win the House. We might hold the Senate. And unless we put Donald in jail and he can't run for office ever again, which is what should have happened a while back, they're going to, even if that would happen, again, maybe somebody else would run instead of him and they learn the lessons and they make a martyr out of him and use it somehow to their advantage. So I'm very worried. I thought I was done with politics. Once Biden won, I'm like, okay, now we can relax. Not so.
And your parrot is also very worried about this as well, because I would be screaming like that too. I am in my head, quite honestly, because it's terrifying. One of the reasons it's terrifying is because think about it this way. All of these egregious things that McConnell has done, in my view, the greatest traitor to this country since Robert E. Lee, Mitch McConnell, denying Merrick Garland a hearing, shoving 3 illegitimate Supreme Court justices in, all of the things he's done vis-a-vis stacking the courts, et cetera, all of those things have been done within the system. Just as, with the Rittenhouse trial, I was, as most sane people, deeply, deeply, deeply upset about it. I thought the judge was a disaster. And a lawyer said to me that in the Rittenhouse case, the law in, I think, Wisconsin is not, it wasn't such an open and shut in terms of finding him guilty because of the law. I'm like, well, then that's a problem because you know what? Slavery was legal.
Yeah.
What Andrew Jackson did to Native Americans was legal. So when your laws don't prevent atrocities.
We need to change those laws. How come they're still on the books? I mean, that's what I always say. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's right. And this certainly wasn't right. We need to change the laws, but that takes too long.
And we're seeing this too with the Supreme. In fact, the Supreme Court has, over the course of its history, been one of the most anti-democratic forces in America. We're seeing that now. Just because the Supreme Court says it's constitutional doesn't mean it is. Hello, SB 8 in Texas, right? So it is. Another thing that worries me is the fact that I think most of us really did think that we were going to have a respite. That, okay, we totally dodged a bullet. Like, how many times in human history do we grab democracy from the jaws of autocracy? I don't think it happens very frequently.
Right.
But it's not over, because 2016, even though I think most people didn't realize it at the time, was the most important election of our lifetime. And then guess what? 2020 was the most important election of our lifetime. And now 2022 is, because if we lose the House or the Senate, I think it's over. I don't like being cynical or pessimistic, but I think that's realistic to say. Do you think we have until 2024?
I agree. I don't know if we lose the House. Really sets the tone, doesn't it? And then the Senate approves it. You can't vote on anything in the Senate unless the House brings it up. And then we have the House, but then Mitch was shutting everything down. It's crazy. It's supposed to be a system that works, but it clearly is not working right now. There's going to be such gridlock, but because Republicans are such bullies, they don't give a shit about protocol. They don't give a shit about rules. They will bend them however they need to. And whenever the Democrats are in power, they don't want to change the rules. I mean, look at the freaking filibuster. It's like it's a no-brainer. What are you still thinking about? And again, remember the origins of the filibuster. So Democrats play too nice. And I'm not saying play dirty, but just play tough. We can stand up to them and say, this is not okay. This is not how, this is what we're going to do because we're in charge. We won the election. When Trump won, I have a mandate now because I won by so many votes. The count was the same. And we're acting as if we lost the election.
But that's the thing. He lost by 3 million votes.
Yeah, well, there's that.
Biden won by 8 million practically.
Yeah.
And yes, you're right. Democrats continue to play by a rule book that no longer exists because the Republicans blew it up, right? And the thing about people like Manchin is, you just mentioned the filibuster. It's like, do they not understand United States history? The filibuster is not in the Constitution.
Nope.
It's a mechanism that was put in place to help racists be racist more easily. I mean, not the only reason, but preventing the tyranny of the majority or whatever. So now we're living under the tyranny of the minority.
Right.
And we are forced to kowtow to a guy who got like 200,000 votes and seems not to understand the seriousness of the threat we face. As far as I'm concerned, if you were trying to negotiate with Republicans in the Senate, you are making common cause with fascists.
Yeah, I agree 100%. For me, if I were an elected official, I would be screaming, end the filibuster. We have to do that, and we have to pass the Voting Rights Act. You do those two things, we're okay. And then because of that, get rid of the stupid electoral college. That is such again, when we're supposed to be a democracy, it's not even close to that, and now we're getting further and further away from it, and we're not doing anything about changing that trajectory. And it would be
right, like add 4 seats to the Supreme Court.
There's that too. Yeah.
At least 3 of them are illegitimate. It's just leveling the playing field. It's not packing anything. It's just making it fair. But I guess they're worried about offending people. It's quite something. Republicans will offend you all day long.
They don't
and do worse.
I remember reading
and get away with it.
Yeah, I remember reading an article that because the Republicans were screaming about activist judges. This is like 15, 20 years ago. Activist judges, they're always going too far on the left, blah, blah, blah. And then there was a group of people that actually did studies of all these cases, the last 50 years, of the judgments, and they actually found that the activist judges were the ones on the right, not on the left.
Always. And it's like 99% of the people who commit voter fraud, which, by the way, happens like 1 out of a billion votes cast, they're all Republicans.
There's that.
So,
Voting for the dead mother or voting twice and the kids voting that's not of age. I know, it's just... And by the way, it doesn't matter because there's so little of it that we don't give a damn. But remember, Donald was screaming about that it's rigged way before the first election in 2016. It's all rigged. It's rigged. It's rigged. He was setting the trap from the beginning.
If he doesn't win, it's rigged. And even though he did, quote unquote, I mean, I don't think he won at all. But the fact that he got 3 million fewer votes suggests to him that it was rigged. It was all immigrants or something. I mean, he's not a well man. But the fact that all of that has become not just fodder on the right, but sort of rules by which they're living. Voter fraud, which doesn't exist, because he screamed about it so much in 2016 and in 2020, is the rationale for making it harder for people to vote.
Yeah, that's... So we're not fixing the problems. They may not make people vote, but the voter fraud, if it existed, still hasn't been fixed. But the hypocrisy is what really bothers me. The other day, I'm driving and a guy passes me. He had to be doing 100 miles an hour, but he's got that flag in the back, the police flag, the American flag with the blue stripe. Okay, you support the police, but you're going down the highway at 100 miles an hour. Okay, good to know.
Oh, yeah. Again, the rules either don't apply to them or they just don't exist. One of the things I find very frustrating, and I imagine this is very much true for you because you're somebody who has, well, not always, because I think that might be overstating it a bit, but you have not controlled your destiny, but you have made very deliberate, very difficult choices over the course of your life to get what you wanted or to have what needed to happen in your life happen. So to be in this situation now, which is frustrating for anybody on the left, but especially as somebody who has over the course of your life and career been able so often to make things happen. What is it like just to be, oh my God, I'm just watching this go by? Or is there something we can do?
Well, we need better people running for office. I'm involved here with getting people to register to vote and then, of course, try to get them more democratic. But, I'm doing a little bit on my end here in Florida, but it's... I have a family, I have 2 kids, and I have a life, and quite frankly, I feel too old for this fight. I wish the younger generation would get more involved because this is their future. If the planet warms up, it's not going to affect me, but it's certainly going to affect them. And they're not paying enough attention. They're like, politics, who cares? It doesn't really matter. So. I wish we could make a better difference for the younger generation to pay more attention and recognize the gravity of the situation and make them more involved, if nothing else.
How old are your daughters?
16 and 20.
Okay, I have a 20-year-old daughter. Daughters are the best. Just saying. And it's a little different because I blame myself entirely for why my daughter is not exactly into politics because it was very personal, as you can imagine. So things were a little rough in 2017, shall we say.
Family gatherings.
Yeah. We step back a little bit. Kids that age, how we've made things so hard for them, like between school shootings and climate change and now the political crisis in this country. And then, of course, we saddle them with a global pandemic because the American government at that time decided that it was politically viable just to let people die and make things worse. I sometimes empathize with I don't think it's a lack of interest. It's more of
they can't do anything. They feel like they're helpless. Yeah, they can't do anything.
Yeah, so why care? Because caring would just make everything harder.
Right. It's like playing tennis, playing a match and giving it everything you have, and then you still lose. It hurts like hell. So a lot of people, they kind of bail during the match. They're like, oh, I don't really care, and they don't really try, because if they that's Pushkin. Um, if they really try hard and lose, it hurts a lot more than if you don't try. And maybe you kind of resign yourself to that fate, and it's like, oh, it's going to work out one way or the other. It's not really going to affect me. People only pay attention when it affects them personally, whether it's physically or emotionally or financially. Then they start paying attention. If a member of their family gets Parkinson's disease, all of a sudden they start raising money for Parkinson's because it affects them personally. So,
that's so true.
And then you are kind of invested emotionally, and then you do more than you maybe needed to do or thought that would ever do. But again, I think they figure it's going to be okay, and I can't really make a difference, so why bother?
Listen, when you're 20, it's very difficult. 20-year-olds think they're immortal anyway, right? It's very difficult to think, we're facing extinction here.
Right.
So I better wrap my head around that. But I do agree with you. It's so important to get them engaged. And the question is, like, how do you get them engaged without freaking them out constantly? You need a carrot sometimes. You can't just keep using the stick of, we're all going to die if we don't do something. I feel so guilty is the wrong word because it's not my fault, but I feel awful about what we've done collectively, the baby boomers and Gen X to Gen Z. It's but we need to solve that problem because that is the future right there. And like you said, though, it's exhausting. It's exhausting. It's a constant fight, and it sort of feels like you've been fighting your whole life, and you got to this point where you leave your home to come to the United States. You renounce your you renounce your country. It's impossible for me to imagine what that was like. How isolating, how terrifying. Left your family. And then you came out, and at the time, that was all. It's not like that was in the 2000s. That was in the
this was
early
40
80s,
years
right?
ago.
40 years ago, when kids, it was not an easy thing to do at all, and risky too, financially, in terms of support and all of that politically, and then was it 6 years ago, you proposed. I saw your proposal. It was this beautiful, beautiful thing.
Thank you.
You proposed to Julia.
Yes.
And now you've been married for 6 years, is it?
We proposed, was 7 years ago in December.
7 years.
And I proposed during the US Open
2014.
in September.
Yes.
And then we got married in December in New York because it wasn't legal in Florida. It finally became legal 3 weeks later when Pam Bondi decided to not challenge the rulings. So finally she let go of that, which was kind of, I believe in the sanctity of heterosexual marriage. Meantime, she was married for the third time herself.
Yeah, that's always the way it works on the right.
Isn't that something? So
I think it's your fault that she got divorced 3 times.
We've been together
it was your gay
13
marriage
and a half years now, and married for 7. So yeah, that was pretty special. I didn't think that was going to happen. Same-sex marriage legal, and it really surprised me how much of a difference I felt not being married to Julia as much as the difference for what it meant for the family. We now had legal protection, and it I didn't realize how much I missed it until I had it, because you never thought about that possibility before. And now that you have it, it's like, oh my God, it was like a really big sigh of relief. It was almost like coming to another country, because now we're safe. And anyway, so it meant a lot to me, and it was pretty special.
Yeah, so it's been this incredible journey, Now you guys are married, you're raising your kids in Florida. So it's this really wonderful culmination of all of these things you fought for. So the arc of your story, it's just beautiful. And what I I love this because it's so I mean, it's not normal it's not like something that usually happens to people, but it's so normal in the sense that your wife is on the Housewives of Miami. So I fucking love that. Is that what it's called? I'm sorry. I'm not a
Real Housewives of Miami. Yes.
Real Housewives of Miami. Yeah. Like, how fucking cool is that?
It's crazy. A friend of ours invited her. She thought she was just going to be a friend of the housewife, and then she ended up being one of the housewives, and it's been crazy. She got a lot busy for about 3 months when they were filming, and we'll see if they pick it up, and she'll do season number 2. But and if she gets invited back. But so far so good. It's 3 episodes out, and yeah, I was in a couple of those episodes, and if you know me, you know I've run away from cameras. I don't look for the spotlight at all. So people are usually hugging the camera. I'm like, really? I need to put on makeup? Really? Can I just do it? Just do a voice?
Yeah, exactly. I can do a voice off.
But it's been great. She's happy, and she has an amazing set up an amazing farm on that she has chickens and ducks, and we have geese, and she had this vision, and she made it happen, and she got invited on the show, and now she's the first out with the first gay couple on the show. There have been some gay appearances, but nobody's been a housewife or a husband. It's pretty cool that she's become a pioneer when I think she had no idea what she was getting herself into when she fell in love with me. But anyhow, she's now a lesbian icon. Go figure.
I mean, God must have had some idea, because you too are an icon of many different kinds of icons. So
thank you.
You know, she must have had some glimpse, but even so, what's just it? We're talking about the trauma of America, the dangers we're all facing, and yet at the same time, there's this incredibly inspiring idea that what you two are doing now is also very American. And how it's just, I don't know, I just gave myself chills. Because when in American history would that have been sort of a commonplace thing? Oh yeah, you know, Martina Navratilova and her wife are doing Housewives of Miami. It's just, I don't know. Yeah, I find it kind of stunning.
True when you put it that way. I mean, it's a slice of Americana, isn't it? And you know, when the Berlin Wall came down and the Soviet Union fell apart, I'm like, yes, you know, the Cold War's over. We can relax, and everybody's gonna be happy, and democracy around the world. And then Obama got elected. I'm like, great, racism is done. And here we are, and yet, so you kind of feel like you're losing America, but then, you know, Julia's part of the folklore of what America's all about. So, yeah, right. we have to keep hoping, and we have to keep working, and fingers crossed that things will work out, and do what we can. You know, it's like recycling. You don't feel like you're making a difference, but then you put all those bottles that you save in 1 year, and it would fill up the house. And then imagine everybody doing that. So we all do our part, and we'll be okay. But it's teetering. We're teetering.
And as somebody who's fought a lot, it does feel like we're fighting the same fights over again. And, you know, there's that sign that you often see at women's marches, like, I can't fucking believe I have to march for this stuff again.
Right.
I thought we were done with this. I thought we were done with, you know, anti-choice laws and that level of institutionalized misogyny and racism and what have you. And we're not. And I think it's because we take so much for granted. And maybe if nothing else, we'll stop doing that.
I hope so. I remember Michelangelo Signorile writing a book when the same-sex marriage was passed. He says that this fight is just beginning. They're going to try to roll it back. He saw it coming, and same with the voting rights. They just keep rolling it back. You know, it's like that little pebble, that little drop that hits the rock, and eventually you're going to break that rock if you keep hitting it with that little drop of water. And they just keep chiseling away, and before you know it, you got nothing left. So we just have to keep fighting. It's tiring, but at the same time, what is the alternative, right? So.
Oh yeah, listen. I'm not giving up until I have to flee the country, which may happen. I'm not kidding. I think that's a possibility.
I'm there.
Yeah, of course you do. So, and that should motivate all of us. Yeah. Not that anybody should care if I have to leave the country, but that people will have to leave the country if things continue to go south. So there is no reason. I have no patience with people who are like, "Oh, it's over." I'm like, no, it is if you say it is.
No, it's not.
But it's not by any stretch. No. We have at least 11 months. Yeah. But you just moved, which is, no matter what a wonderful thing it is, like I just moved to a place I love. I'm back in New York City. It's still exhausting and stressful. So I know you have boxes and you have pets and you have kids and technical problems. I can't really, to say I appreciate the fact you're here would be the understatement of the century. I'm so grateful that you agreed to be here, but I'm grateful that I had a chance to watch your career, to see what it's like when a powerful woman owns her power and believes to her core that she can make a difference. Yeah. I didn't have a lot of role models when I was growing up. I know that's shocking. But having people, even though you're not that much older, when you're a kid, 8 and 18, 10 and 20, that's a huge difference. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that you've accomplished what you've accomplished, both professionally and personally. And I'm grateful that you're in the fight. Like we all need to be in this fight together. And,
thank you. I appreciate your kind words, but I must say you inspire people too. You are a role model now for some younger ones. I read both your books, and we're in this fight together. So you might be honored to have me, but I'm honored that you asked me. So I appreciate this, and I can't wait to meet you in person, and all the girls in New York.
Oh, man, how fun would that be? 2 20-year-olds, an 18-year-old, and the three of us. We would have so much fun. Martina Navratilova, the honor, honestly, is all mine.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you again, and let's stay in touch, and say hi to all of your many, many pets.
Will do.
And your kids and Julia, and stay safe down there, please.
Thanks.
And now for one of my favorite parts of the show, I get to answer your questions. Don't forget, you can email me every week at one word, The Mary Trump Show @politicon.com, and I'll get to as many questions as I can. First up this week is from Phil in Moscow, Idaho. I noticed a guitar at your place. I play too. What is your favorite type of music to play when you want to escape all the noise your uncle has caused all of us? I'm sorry to say I'm not nearly as good a guitar player as I would like to be. However, my favorite kinds of music to play are folk and classic rock. I would love to play blues and jazz, but they're way, way too hard for me. So honestly, though, I think everybody should start. I didn't start playing guitar until I was in my late 30s. So it's never too late. We all need to do something creative to keep us sane in these fascinating times we're living through. From Alex in Edinburgh, Scotland, one of my favorite countries and one of my favorite cities. In the UK, there will be an independent inquiry into the government's handling of the COVID crisis. There's also talk about a separate inquiry into the media's reporting of the crisis and whether they help stoke anti-vaccine feelings, creating further confusion instead of clarity. Do you think such an inquiry would ever work or be authorized in the US? No, I don't. This came up a couple of weeks ago with my friend Joyce Vance. I was suggesting that Fox hosts like Laura Ingraham and Sean Hannity, who were on the phone on January 6th, clearly aware of the insurrection beforehand and clearly wanting to have some influence in how Donald responded during the crisis. And I'm pretty certain they weren't making those phone calls in their role as quote unquote journalists. I also don't think they are journalists. But as Joyce made very clear, you have to treat them as such. And it's a slippery slope when you start questioning the media in that way. So I think it's highly unlikely. Well, I think it's like near impossible that any such inquiry would be set up here, although I'd like to think that news outlets would perform their own kind of postmortem and have their own reckoning, especially the New York Times and CNN. But unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen either. From Kathy, she asks, I wonder why anti-abortion legislators never get questioned about the sex education or other programs their states have in place to help girls and women avoid unwanted pregnancies off the bat. What do you think? Yeah, I think that's a huge missing piece of this. Anti-choice legislators only talk about the cells, the blastocysts. They never talk about anything that helps women from getting pregnant. I guess the assumption on their part is because that's just encouraging girls and women to have sex, and we can't have that now, can we? But if you were really somebody who's anti-abortion, you would think that you would do everything in your power to prevent unwanted pregnancies. So it's just more hypocrisy. I think by talking about things like making birth control free and easily accessible and teaching girls and boys sex education in a way that's really relevant to their lives and helps empower them. And that's not on their agenda. Their agenda, as we've seen in Texas and as we've seen with some Supreme Court rulings and the way the Supreme Court is, or the 6 Republican justices on the Supreme Court, how they're handling the Mississippi abortion case. This is about whether or not women are equal citizens in America, and I don't think that they believe that women are. And Texas, the SB 8 ruling in Texas has made it clear that at least in Texas, women are second-class citizens. Keenan in Wilmington, Delaware asks, what is your opinion of COVID-19 vaccine mandates for public school teachers and children? Yes. I believe in vaccine mandates for any kind of communicable disease that could result in getting a lot of people sick or a lot of people dead. And this shouldn't even be a question. You cannot go to kindergarten without having gotten your measles, mumps, and rubella shot. I don't see people complaining about that. You have to have your tetanus shot. You have to, in some cases, have a flu shot. So the COVID vaccine should be absolutely no different. It's quite disappointing that some courts have knocked down President Biden's vaccine mandates for companies with, I guess, more than 100 employees. It shouldn't even be a political decision, much like abortion. It's a medical decision, and it's a little unnerving that medical decisions are increasingly being left in the hands of insurance companies and judges. But yes, vaccines all the way. Everybody should get vaccinated and get your booster shot and wear your mask. From Susie in Wisconsin. Politicians in the Wisconsin legislature are pulling again to challenge the Biden presidency using Wisconsin taxpayers' funds. I'm seriously considering sending in my Wisconsin state taxes for 2021 when they come due in January 2022. I'd love to get your take on this extreme political protest. I'm all for political protest, but that will just get you in trouble. I think the only way to avoid having to pay taxes in this country is if you're really, really rich. The only way for something like that to work is to make it a really coordinated effort with many, 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 many people. That might be worth putting together, but as valuable as it is to protest and make your voice heard, I worry that would just get you in trouble. So please pay your taxes, and hopefully we will figure out another way to fight that fight. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Mary Trump Show with me, Mary Trump, and some of my favorite people at the intersection of politics, activism, and culture. Please send me your questions for next week's show via email to, all one word, themarytrumpshow@politicon.com, or look for the address in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you. Follow The Mary Trump Show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, and please give us a 5-star rating because it really helps other people find the show. Stay safe, and I'll see you next week.